tremendous cost of pay loss. Are there any other costs other than obviously you had to negotiate within your marriage and you need a good marriage to be able to do that?
Well, I think that's a cost. I think there's a secondary cost in terms of the professional side of things, that although the legislature doesn't demand much more than 4 solid months and then some interim committee time, it is very, very difficult to negotiate another job that fits neatly into that puzzle. So for people who are compelled to make a family wage, it becomes nearly impossible. And while I am a definite promoter of the citizen legislature concept and think that it is part of the unique value of a place like Kansas, I also recognize that by its nature, it's a very difficult commodity. I mean, there are people who make huge sacrifices to be here because it just is not very easy to find an employer who's willing to say to an employee, oh, sure, don't worry, be gone from January till the middle of April, and everything's going to be fine. And then be gone whenever you're called for special session or whenever you need to be in an interim committee, and we'll just work around it. So I think those costs are ongoing. But there's a toll on just the private side of a person just to be in public life. I mean, there is, I think, an expectation, and it's an expectation that it's realistic for people to demand that you are accessible to them, which means that people call me on the weekends, at night, early in the morning. They want to know who I'm hanging out with. They want to know who pays me my money, who are my friends, what I'm thinking. I mean, there's a certain privacy that all of us give up. And periodically that's very difficult. I think it's difficult for other members of my family to accept. I think it's periodically something I resent until I remind myself that that's an expectation that probably the public has a right to. But it's a sort of exposure, who my husband's law clients are, how much we pay in taxes, how much our house costs, all of those aspects of one's life that we regard as personal, once you are willing to stand for public office, are no longer regarded as personal. They're very public. I know for a fact if my kids were to get into trouble, it would be treated differently than if my neighbor's kids get into trouble. That's not fair to them. It's probably not fair to me, but it's real, and it will happen. So I think there are all kinds of costs. There are costs on the kids. It's very strange to be a political kid and to read negative things in the newspaper about your mother or father, or to drive through a neighborhood, your own neighborhood in the fall, and to look at people you know who have put up yard signs for the opponent. I mean, my kids still, the yard sign bit is probably the most difficult thing for them to deal with because it's very personal. If they drive by a house which is owned by someone they know, and there is a sign there of my opponent, it is something that just is absolutely unacceptable to them. I mean, they just cannot understand how so-and-so who knows us could do that. I mean, they take it very personally. It's as if it had their name on it. And no amount of rational discussion, because it is personal. I mean, they basically are at the bottom line of what it's all about. I have had neighbors say to me, oh, don't worry about my sign for your opponent. You know this is politics, it's not personal. Well, that's baloney. Of course it's personal. I mean, this is my job. What they are publicly saying to the neighbors is, I'd rather have her lose her job. that's pretty personal.
Mm-hmm.
So I think kids identify it as a baseline, and it's hurtful. Some of it is. I mean, my kids have luckily been in a situation that I've won.
Mm-hmm.
It's very painful to be in a situation where the races don't go well. And both the kids this year, independent of one another, they are now 6 and 9. And we had interesting conversations this fall about losing. I think that the older one really understood for the first time what it meant and talked to me, what will happen in about mid-October? What will happen if you lose? I said, well, I'd probably get another job. He said, well, will somebody hire you? I said, well, it's a good question, but yeah, I think so. Because they don't want me to be their legislator doesn't mean that I won't be able to do something else. And so we talked through that, and he seemed relieved that I could be employable at some point. The little one had a different approach. He again had the same, he was not in on the earlier conversation, and he said, what will you do if you lose? And I said, I don't know, I'll probably be sad for a while, and then it'll be all right. He said, will you cry? I said, well, yeah, I probably would cry. But I'll stop, and it'll be all right, and, we'll figure out something else. But clearly, Ned was old enough to want to know if I could bring in a paycheck. John just wanted to know if it would make me cry, and I thought that was a pretty good indication of their differences in ages but both of them had clearly been worrying about it, and it was clear enough to them that the difference, the other side of winning was losing, and it bothered them, and luckily they felt able to talk about it, but it's not easy. Very few other kids have parents who every couple of years have at least a public vote of confidence by their employers. And it is very public. It gets listed in the newspaper, and other people know that you either win or lose. It's not something that nobody knows about, and it can be a secret that you don't have to tell. It's all done very openly and publicly.
Indeed. What do you see yourself doing then? Obviously, if you lose, and you'll cry and you'll get another job. How long do you expect to be here? What future would you like? Are you willing to answer any of these things or explain why not?
I don't know. At this point in my life, for all kinds of reasons, this is a perfect place for me to be. It's a great place, given the age of my kids. It's a great way to be involved in politics without having to give up huge amounts of time and energy. I have a nice trade-off. I'm convinced that the most unhappy politicians I've ever known in my life are people who have a very clearly marked out timetable. When I'm 30, I will be in Congress. When I'm 35, I will be president. When I'm 45, I will be emperor. Because politics doesn't work that way. It is absolutely being in the right place at the right time and being willing to take risks. There are very few free rides in this game, and there are very few clear paths that you can plot out and determine, that's exactly where I'm going to be in 10 years. So I guess I love where I am right now because Reagan dumped a lot of things back on the states, and in part because it was bound to happen anyway, that legislators are the cutting edge of development of all kinds of policy issues. Unlike when my dad was in Congress in the mid-'60s, that was clearly the place to be during the Great Society programs and the war on poverty, and they were making huge decisions about big changes in society. That's no longer happening in Congress anymore. I wouldn't be in Congress right now if you paid me $100,000 plus the salary. It just is not appealing So right now, I'm exactly where I want to be. If something were to come up and in the future, I'm not afraid of running for something else. On the other hand, I wouldn't be at all unhappy if I never served in any capacity except the legislature. I think this is a dandy place to be.
Great. Let me just get one thing on the record. What was your maiden name? What is your father's name?
John Gilligan.
John Gilligan of Ohio.
Of Ohio.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
It's been a pleasure.
Sure.